All right, you are listening to another episode of She Did What? I have Lizzie Schliessman here.
Hello, everybody.
She didn't know we were going to do that little intro.
I got it.
I just gave her the mad eyes. So today we are talking about Jocelyn Burnell, a PhD in, what was it? Astronomy?
Astronomy and physics, I believe.
What's that? Astrophysics.
There we go.
I was like, wait, let's put
There's a
this
combination of both.
together.
Yes.
So, as is a common theme in our show, Jocelyn Burnell was an assistant while she was getting her PhD, and she was somebody who found these irregular, how do you say that, like radio pulses in
I
space?
think they're like pulsars. What did she call them?
They were eventually called pulsars.
Oh, yeah. So they were like irregular, we'll explain this better when we have like the scientific explanation. But basically there's these stars that they didn't realize pulsated the space, and it makes the space, bigger or smaller around these specific stars. And they went really, really rapidly, and they didn't realize that stars could do this up until that point where she, kind of noticed that while she was an assistant. So that's kind of what what her claim to fame is for her early life, for sure.
Right. And what we will discuss is how the Nobel Peace Prize from that year in 1974 went to her superior
advisors.
I'm air quoting.
Yeah.
And then we'll just kind of talk about the backlash of that, why it happened. And then Lizzie and I actually watched a little documentary about it. And so therefore we kind of have insight into however many years later.
Yeah, her insights on it, like her ideas about what happened and, how she's been dealing with it since then.
Yeah. So we can jump right into her early life, I guess. She was born in 1943 in Northern Ireland, in Belfast, Ireland. Her father was an architect, and avid reader, it says, and that just leads, or I guess it's worth mentioning because she read a lot of books because her father obviously had a lot of books around, and she read a book about astronomy, and she fell in love.
Yeah, and both of her parents have been very supportive, or were very supportive. I believe they've passed, but were very supportive since like day one. They really wanted her to get a really good education, even though back then women weren't expected to get that good of an education, but they wanted her to be successful, well-educated. And it's kind of to be noted that when she was doing her exams for higher education, she actually failed, but her parents were very adamant about not letting her slip through the cracks. And she kind of noted that she started by failing. And that was kind of an important part to realizing that science is important to her, because science is a bunch of failures until you figure out a possible theory that still technically isn't ever absolute.
Right. Yeah, she said that a lot in her thing. She kept saying, like, I can't say that something's 100% because that's literally what science is like proving it all the time. I did kind of, side note, wanted to talk about how a lot of the women that we talk about in the podcast, it's interesting in that their parents kind of have to go above and beyond to get these women educated.
Yeah, to start them out.
Right, because there's no, no one's going to do it for you. You have to be like that parent that's like, no, my daughter's not going to, how do you say that, like etiquette school. She's going to Cambridge.
Yeah, she's going to be a scientist. She's not going to be a housewife. Right. Which, there's nothing wrong with being a housewife, but especially
if you don't want to be, then there is.
Especially in like younger educated schools, like little girls are not pushed to do STEM. And I mean, that's still a problem. And we're in 2017? Right. And this is in, I don't know, when was this?
Like 50s,
like the 50s, 60s. So it's really remarkable that she even got like a start to doing that, because her parents had to be the forcing factor to give her that opportunity, because a lot of little girls aren't pushed to do that.
Right. So after she failed these entry exams that we were discussing, her parents, again, were like, nope, you're still going to go to school. So they sent her to a Quaker school, specifically a boarding school within the Quaker religion. You can say it's a religion, right? Quaker. Yeah. And something that I was reading is that this religious institution actually tends to respect and hold women's education and thought higher than other religions. So it was kind of
They're very like equal. The
Right.
Quaker people are very equal. I mean, they have very conservative values, but at least when it comes to equality, they don't assume women to be, you know, the lesser
Right.
portion of society.
And a perfect example of that is that there is an all women's boarding school available for women that, you know, probably can't get education otherwise. So it's very interesting. She, or at least the bio that I read, talks about how there wasn't much science equipment there, which is, again, interesting because it's a women's boarding school.
Yeah.
But they had great teachers, and, you know, she was able to be inspired and supported from her teachers at a pretty young age. So once she was done with her boarding school, it was time to move on to university.
Yay. So it looks like in 1965, she got her Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Glasgow, and then started her PhD program at Cambridge under Anthony Hewish.
Hewish? I don't know. I haven't said it out loud.
Hewish, maybe. But yeah, so she, for the first 2 years, assisted in the 81.5 megahertz radio telescope to track quasars, which was done in 1967. And that's kind of where the story, for her at least, fame begins.
Yeah. So before we get into the thick of the controversy, as you say, controversy, is that what?
Controversy. I don't know.
Yeah. So I just thought it was really interesting that she was there. So this radio telescope was the first of its kind. And this is just when, you know, they started really studying space and realizing that there was more than just, I didn't even say that, like lights in the sky. I think they knew a lot about that there was matter out there.
Yeah.
But this is like the first of expanding their idea of how big the universe was.
Yeah, I believe that this is kind of the same time frame where the space race was happening too. So space, I think she highlighted that it was like pretty well funded for these like astronomers and physicists to kind of put energy into that because it was a space race. They wanted to get to the moon first. So there was also a lot of other funding for stars and like space matter and things of that sort.
Once the telescope was, built and all this stuff, they just start recording data from different signals they were getting. This is around the time, I guess a little bit later, not a little bit, a decade or two after Einstein's theory of relativity. And he was the one, my understanding from Lisa Meitner, our last episode, that he, how do I say this, like made light physical, right?
Yeah, so he made it able to kind of give a little bit of backing to these theories because before they were like, oh, this might be happening, but it's like, no, this is like pretty credible.
Right.
It has to do with Einstein's theory, like they go in conjunction, which was like super groundbreaking because if that hadn't have happened, this wouldn't have been able to come to fruition at all.
It's interesting how many big names we have in our story. We'll get to a few in a minute. This is one of those times in our story, I should say, where Jocelyn Bell Burnell, she's sitting there, it's late, she's a student, she's just recording mindless data, like so much. How'd you say? She starts seeing like these irregular pulses.
Well, I don't know. They weren't irregular, which was the problem. It
Oh,
was
right,
like they
right.
were very steadily going like back
But,
and
like,
forth. It was like a
huge.
wave, like
Right.
huge waves. And she's like, this is interesting. This doesn't like correlate with any other thing that we've been thinking about. So these pulsars were going, well, they were later named pulsars, but these pulses were going very regularly back and forth from this one spot that they were getting signals from. And then she realized, all right, we got something here. So she went to her advisors, I think the next day, and were like, hey guys, this is the findings I got. And then like a couple of days later, she stumbles upon them in a meeting without her, which she was confused as to why she wasn't let into the meeting at first, but she knocked on the door and asked them to let her in. And they were like, oh, Jocelyn, like, yes, come in, like, please explain this. Yeah, so and I think at first, didn't they think it was like aliens? They thought it was like little green men and they weren't going to give out the results because they thought it would freak people out.
Right. So I think the 50s is when like the first like Area 51 aliens thing happened, but this is like scientific proof and evidence, and so they kept it
A little
under wraps. Yeah, and they called it little green men, or I think the media called it that, and like, you know, chicken or the egg thing, they called it that. I think they were on edge a little bit because it was like you can't let anything leak. And then also they were kind of getting nervous about it because
Yeah.
what if it was aliens?
Yeah. And then I don't remember how I think actually she found the pulsars, and that's what gave proof that it wasn't little green men, that it was like the fields that were going
Right.
back and forth. So they'll touch on it a little bit in the clip that we'll play. But basically, she found this groundbreaking thing, and then she got a lot of, the advisors got a lot of attention, and she was linked to it.
Yeah, so something I want to mention too. So Lizzie was talking about how she already had all this evidence. And so she was going out of her way to kind of like, I think she said she stayed up all night. So the night she found and realized that there was a rhythm to these pulsars, we'll eventually call them, she kind of confirmed herself. So, she's a scientist. She made sure that it wasn't just an anomaly that she was finding, that this was real. And so by the time she presented her work to her, supervisors, it was
pretty much
how do you say that? Yeah, like all the research was there. It
Yeah.
wasn't like, hey, maybe.
Yeah, no, she's like,
no.
this is here. I found this. I think we're good to go.
Right.
So then, in 1968, Nature published her finding, or rather their finding.
Right.
She received her PhD from Cambridge that same year, and she also got married. So it was a pretty big year for her. The science community, I think initially, right off the bat, really, really enjoyed this finding. They thought of it as one of the best findings of the year. And they, no one really questioned it. They were like, this theory is definitely, sound.
Right. And obviously they didn't know this then, but immediately it was important because it was giving evidence to different kinds of stars, right? That they were used to. So, they're used to stars A, B, and C, and she comes in like, oh, remember Stephen Hawking and his black hole stuff? Well, that could be a reality.
Yeah, here's all this other information that is probably true.
Through history, we've seen some theories that have stood the test of time well, and some that have disappeared relatively quickly. A theory that stands the test of time well will have been prodded and poked and battered and examined from every angle, and it still stands up. And Einstein's theory of relativity is one of those that's been subject to a lot of scrutiny, but it was only following the discovery of pulsars that it was possible to test Einstein's ideas about gravity. Einstein's theories predict that where you have a pair of stars orbiting each other, this system produces a new kind of radiation, gravitational radiation or gravitational waves. And the effect of these waves being produced are that the two stars move closer together and go round faster, which sends out more gravity waves, so they move closer together and go round even faster, and they actually end up merging. And with the first pulsar that was discovered in one of these binary systems, they've been able to track the orbit, and they have seen that the stars are moving closer together in exactly the manner predicted by Einstein in his theory.
So these are very, very, very powerful stars that they found. And I believe they ended up using this kind of technology for military use. Because obviously this is radio, this is frequencies, this is all that kind of good stuff. So it's very, very important, not just for nerdy astronomy world, but,
For the entire world.
Yeah. As Lizzie was mentioning, there was a ton of media coverage of this because it's space, it's the space race, it's all this cool stuff. And so around this time, her superiors were given the Nobel Prize for this.
For her findings.
For her findings. And how to put that delicately. And so because... it's pretty simply that there was a ton of attention and everyone knew that she was one of the people to do this. So immediately, it didn't really get pushed under the rug.
Well, let's be clear. She didn't get recognition for this. It was just Hewish and Rye. They're the only ones that got recognition. And she's the one that made it come to fruition. And, their arguments as to why she didn't get it were that she was the assistant, even though she was there and she did it. But they also were claiming that it was like right time, right place. They would have found it if she wasn't there, which is just, I don't think is true.
It's just bullshit. We'll play the clip from we're going to play a clip from this documentary we watched, and this old guy is literally like...
It's either Hewish or Rye. It's
Hewish. So Rye was like the coupled of Hewish, but yeah.
Other people were annoyed on my behalf, it has to be said. And there were puns about Nobel, punning on my maiden name, Bell, the Nobel Prize.
I mean, my analogy really is a little bit like when you plan a ship of discovery and you go off, and somebody up the masthead says "land ho." That's great, but I mean, who actually inspired it and conceived it and decided what to do when and so on? I mean, there is a difference between skipper and crew.
Yeah, so Hewish was saying, like, all of these claims that she didn't, deserve the recognition, even though, the scientific community was kind of in uproar. And the coolest thing is Jocelyn kind of didn't bat an eye. She was like, I understand. Like, she was, really aware of the scientific community, not understanding how women can be implemented.
Right.
Like, since day one.
I mean, if anyone knows the oppression of women, it's women.
It's women, yeah. She even said, like, her first day in university, she was the only girl in class. And I think that it was just funny because she's very aware.
Catcalled.
She would get catcalled, and she's like, I had to learn to not be blushing.
Right.
Like, all the time. So she is really secure with herself. I think that it is really inspiring, actually, that despite all of this prejudice against her, she was super cool, calm, and collected. She didn't ever say, yeah, I deserved it. She's like, I respect their decision. And, that takes a lot of class.
It does. I feel like it's almost like she's like, yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Like,
yeah, she's like, yeah, I know I did it. That's all I need to know.
Yeah, she's like
you
I
guys
wasn't
all know
expecting
I
much.
Yeah.
Like, this is the world we live in.
Yeah, and I mean, there was also another really cool part in the documentary where she was saying that, the Nobel Peace Prize is, the mecca of prizes. And she was saying she kind of is glad she didn't get it because she was so young at that point, and she's gotten so many other honors and, cool ceremonial things that have been presented on her.
Yeah.
And I think she was kind of highlighting, like, if I had gotten that Nobel Peace Prize, it's kind of like I've already kind of peaked, and she wanted to keep peaking.
Which is crazy. So. I mentioned Lisa Meitner. She, honestly, I think a lot of women in science at this time have very similar career. Mm-hmm. I don't know how to say that. Careers in general.
Yeah, just kind of like similar experiences.
Right.
Maybe not with the same like work they're doing, but definitely like how people treat them.
Yeah, because so as Lizzie's saying, she received countless awards since then. Mm-hmm. She was heads of departments everywhere. Yeah. Like, she had a very successful career.
She still does. She's like still like, I mean, I think she's retired now, but she like still does the space thing.
Yeah. Also, something that they mentioned towards the end, which I think is great, is that so this was used as an example, mm-hmm. and now when Nobel Peace Prizes are awarded, everyone in the team gets recognition. And that's happening more and more. Yeah. Just in general.
It should.
Right.
It's not like you can't, it's like it doesn't take one person, it takes a village. It's like, it's a group effort. It's not one person. So, I mean, she's badass. She has so much grace. I think that it's really inspiring kind of to see her, not getting the recognition and being so chill about it.
Going above it.
I'd be fucking pissed. Like, I'd be like, no.
Right.
Like, I would fight it, I'd be very vocal about it. But for her to have such a level head about it.
Because she had people, like, pissed.
Yeah, no. And, like, a lot of people in this science community. I feel like basically everybody besides, like.
Them.
Yeah. So it's really cool. She's really awesome. You should watch this documentary that we're going to have clips of, or that we've had clips of.
Mm-hmm. And all of our resources will be cited, of course.
Yes. But, yeah.
Check her out. It's cool. It's really inspiring because, like, we'll never know what it's like to struggle that much, you know, like.
And be that successful at something and still not get recognition.
Right. That too. So thanks, Lizzie,
Yeah.
for doing the research and hanging out. Yeah, this episode was written by Lizzie Schließman and myself, recorded, engineered by me, Megan Maurer. Thank you to Azua, as usual, for the theme music. And
Yeah.
tune
She
in for the
did
next
what?
episode. She did what? Thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
We're in our house,
Our
hanging
house.
out. Yeah, Lizzie's on
yeah.
a break. Yeah, enjoy your life and stay empowered.
Yes, stay empowered.
Proud of the people.
Female.
Yeah. All right.
Futurist female. Bye.
Yeah. Thanks for listening. All right. Blah, 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 blah. Say something.
I'm going to the supermarket.
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 Supermarket. Supermarket.
Are you recording this?
Yeah, I'm like making sure our levels are similar.
All right, it's going to be our DJ song, Supermarket.
Yeah.